The sharp sound of breaking glass cut through the silence like a scream in the dark. A shadow moved quickly across the hallway, heavy boots against old wooden floors. In the corner of the room, a frail woman struggled to breathe, blood tracing a line from her temple. And then, out of the darkness, a deep growl rose, steady and primal. Eyes locked, a flash of fur, and a single, savage leap. Eleanor Whitaker had stopped locking her front gate years ago. In this quiet corner of Georgia, she'd spent most of her life teaching kids how to spell courage and kindness. But since Michael passed and the town began to change, so did her nights. She no longer slept through them. The house was filled with whispers, memories etched in photo frames, a worn recliner that still smelled of pipe smoke, and Rex, the aging German shepherd who hadn't barked in months but never took his eyes off her. She never imagined that her greatest threat wouldn't come from loneliness, but from the world outside finally creeping in. What unfolded that night wasn't just a home invasion. It was a brutal test of everything she thought she'd lost, and everything one old dog refused to forget. This is a story about loyalty beyond pain, about instinct that doesn't age, about a bond stronger than fear. Every morning, Eleanor Whitaker boiled water in the same dented kettle her husband had used during his patrol shifts. She'd pour 2 cups of tea, one for her, one for Michael, and set his gently across the table, like ritual, like refusal. At 76, Eleanor's world had shrunk to the walls of the modest craftsman-style home they'd bought in 1974. The neighborhood had once been a patchwork of children's laughter and Sunday barbecues. Now it whispered of for-sale signs, boarded-up porches and sirens in the distance. She didn't drive anymore. The arthritis in her hands made it too risky. Her daughter called when she could, but lived 3 states away. Most days were spent reading by the window, watching leaves fall or mailboxes fill. Rex lay near her feet, head resting between his front paws, always watching, always listening. Rex wasn't just a pet. He was a piece of Michael. Once a K-9 unit officer, Michael had worked closely with Rex during his final years on the force. When he retired, he brought Rex home. "He's family now," he'd said, and Rex, with his storm-grey eyes and disciplined silence, had become just that. But lately, Eleanor had sensed something different, not in herself, but in Rex. At night, he sat near the front door, ears perked, tail still. Twice she caught him growling low, staring out into the dark yard, as if something or someone was watching back. One morning, she found footprints in the soft soil under the dining room window, just one set, heavy, deep. She told herself it was a delivery man, or maybe the neighbor's nephew, but the fear crept in anyway. She started locking the gate again, then the windows, then the bedroom door. She didn't say anything to her daughter. What could she say? That the house she'd spent a lifetime building now felt like a trap? That every creak in the floorboards made her heart race? She whispered it only once, late at night, with Rex asleep beside her. "I don't feel safe anymore." Rex stirred. He heard her. All Eleanor wanted was a quiet night. It was late, well past midnight, when she finally turned off the reading lamp. The wind rustled through the oak trees in the backyard, and the air was thick with summer heat. She checked the locks one more time, out of habit, and gave Rex a soft pat before closing the bedroom door. She never heard the kitchen window open. Caleb Rowe had done this before, slipping into quiet homes, taking what he needed. Quick jobs, no one hurt. But tonight felt different. He was angry, broke, desperate, and he'd been watching the house for days. No cameras, no visitors, just one old woman, and as far as he could tell, an aging dog that hadn't barked once. He moved through the kitchen like a shadow, drew a rusty knife from his jacket. Cabinets creaked as he opened them. A drawer slammed shut too loud. Eleanor's eyes snapped open. She sat up, heart pounding, breath shallow. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a heavy step on the creaking floorboards. She reached for the lamp. The door flew open. Caleb stepped inside, face half covered by a dirty black hoodie. His eyes were wild. The knife glinted in his hand. "Where's the money, lady?" he growled, slamming the door behind him. Eleanor froze. "There's nothing here," she whispered. I'm retired. Don't lie to me," he snapped, crossing the room in seconds. He yanked open drawers, knocked over a lamp, tore through the nightstand. "Get up! I don't, please!" He grabbed her by the wrist, jerking her out of bed. She stumbled to the floor with a cry, her head striking the corner of the dresser. Blood pooled near her temple. Downstairs, Rex let out a sharp, guttural bark, but he didn't come. He couldn't. Tied to a metal stake in the backyard, something Eleanor had reluctantly done earlier that evening to prevent him from barking too much, Rex now paced in circles, pulling, testing the limits of the leash. Inside, the chaos escalated. Caleb tore through the room, tossing books, picture frames, even Eleanor's late husband's badge. "You people always hide something," he hissed, stepping over her. She curled into herself, sobbing softly. "You're making a mistake," she said. He didn't listen. Another slap. Her lips split. The room spun. And all the while, Rex heard everything. The crashing, the cries, the voice that had once told bedtime stories and fed him from the dinner table. The voice that meant safety. The growl returned deep in his chest. And this time, he didn't stop pulling. Eleanor tried to crawl, her hands slipping in the growing smear of blood on the wooden floor. Her ribs throbbed with each breath, and one eye had already begun to swell shut. The room spun in pulses. Pain, fear, pain again. Caleb was tearing the place apart. Drawers ripped from their rails, clothes flung into corners, heirlooms shattered against the walls. His breathing grew heavier, more frantic, as each search came up empty. "There's got to be something!" he shouted, yanking a blanket off the bed and kicking the frame with a hollow thud. Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice was buried under a throat full of fear. Outside, the leash holding Rex rattled violently. He was pacing faster now, body low to the ground, chest tight against the harness. The stake in the soil trembled, shifted, each pull a protest, each pull a warning. Then came a sound he recognized, a scream, Eleanor's. It wasn't just pain, it was helplessness, the sound of someone finally accepting that no one was coming, no one but him. Rex let out a single bark, sharp and thunderous. Birds in the trees took flight, but Caleb didn't care. He grabbed Eleanor by the arm, dragged her back toward the bed. "You think I'm playing?" he spat, holding the knife just inches from her face. "You think I won't?" She looked at him. Really looked at him. Blood on her face, pain in every breath. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "But you should be." He blinked, then scoffed. "You're crazy." She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking past him, out the open window. Rex was gone. Caleb turned just in time to hear it, the high-pitched snap of wood. The leash had broken free from the stake, and the gate to the backyard creaked open with the push of a heavy body. Rex was inside the house. The thudding of claws on hardwood echoed through the hallway. Caleb stood, knife raised, his face twisted with confusion and something else. Doubt. He moved toward the door. "Get back!" he shouted, but his voice cracked. Then he saw them, two amber eyes burning through the shadows. Rex stepped into the room. No barking, no hesitation, just stillness, low and dangerous like the final beat before a storm. Caleb raised the knife, and Rex moved. He launched forward with a suddenness that erased age and injury. His body hit Caleb like a freight train, knocking the man into the dresser with a sickening crash. The knife clattered to the floor. They struggled, man and beast, tangled in limbs, teeth, and instinct. Rex bit down on the arm, hard, twisting. Caleb screamed. "Get off me!" he cried, punching wildly, but Rex didn't let go. Eleanor from the floor watched through blurred vision. Her heart pounded in sync with every movement. She tried to sit up, gasping through the pain. The cell phone. Where was it? She spotted it, just under the nightstand. She dragged herself forward, inch by inch, ribs screaming. Rex was winning. Caleb's resistance faltered. His cries grew weaker, turning into pleads. Eleanor reached the phone. Hands trembling, she dialed. 911, what's your emergency? Her voice was thin, shaky. There's a man in my house, but my dog, he stopped him. And you? Have you ever witnessed a moment when an animal's instinct felt more human than anything around you? Tell your story in the comments. Sometimes what you've seen, what you've lived, might touch someone who desperately needs to believe that loyalty still exists. Because in a world that often forgets, animals remember. And sometimes they save us without ever saying a word. Rex didn't need commands anymore. Not since Michael. Not since the uniform was folded and stored away. But the training, no, the bond that never left him. He stood over Caleb's heaving body, muscles taut, jaws clamped on the man's wrist. Blood trickled from between his teeth, but he didn't tighten. He didn't need to. Caleb had stopped fighting. The man whimpered beneath him, eyes darting, one hand up in surrender. Please, I'm done. Get him off. But Rex didn't move. His breath was steady, hot and heavy, each exhale a warning. His body blocked Caleb's path completely, a solid wall of fur and force, not aggression, conviction, as if he knew, one move, just one wrong twitch, and it would all start again. Eleanor, still crumpled on the floor, watched with awe. The pain in her side flared with each heartbeat, but for the first time since it began, she wasn't afraid. She was watching a protector. A memory surfaced. Michael in the backyard, years ago, whistling commands as Rex chased and tackled a padded training dummy. He'll do anything for you, he told her with pride, because you're his home now, and he had. Even now, even old, even tired, Rex had answered her fear with fire. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, cautious, heavy boots, voices. Clear left! Dispatch, we have visual on the target, suspect restrained by a dog. The officers burst into the room, weapons raised, then froze. One of them, a tall man with silver at his temples, slowly lowered his flashlight. Is that Rex? He asked, stunned. Eleanor nodded, barely whispering. He never left. The officer knelt carefully, hand extended. Hey, buddy, you remember me? Rex looked at him, measured his scent. Then, finally, released Caleb's arm and stepped back. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just sat beside Eleanor, placing his body between her and everything else. Even with blood on his muzzle, even with his legs trembling from effort, he stood guard. Because Rex didn't just respond to danger, he responded to her. The room was a wreck. Broken glass, overturned furniture, blood smeared across the floor. Caleb lay face down, arms bound behind his back by zip ties one of the officers had pulled from his vest. He moaned quietly, defeated, no longer dangerous, just small. Eleanor sat propped against the wall, a paramedic gently dabbing her forehead with gauze. Her breath trembled, but her eyes were steady. He didn't come for things, she murmured. He came to hurt someone. The paramedic nodded. And your dog? He saved your life, ma'am. She looked over at Rex, who sat only a few feet away, chest rising and falling in heavy bursts. His muzzle was stained, and his right hind leg trembled. He looked exhausted. He shouldn't have had to, she whispered, her voice breaking. Another officer snapped photos of the scene. One crouched beside the shattered nightstand, retrieving Eleanor's late husband's badge from the wreckage. He brushed off the dust, looked at the name. Michael Whitaker, he said softly, turning to Eleanor. Your husband was one of us. She nodded, the tears finally falling. The recognition hung in the room like incense. These men weren't just responding to a call anymore. They were honoring a memory. Outside, blue and red lights still pulsed across the lawn. A small crowd had gathered at the edges of the street, neighbors in robes, a few holding phones, others just clutching each other. It was the most light the house had seen in years. Inside, Rex laid down with a soft groan, curling slowly beside Eleanor. She reached a hand to his fur, fingers trembling as they brushed his ear. You did it, she said. You still remembered how. One of the paramedics looked over at the officers. He should be checked out too. That leg's not right. "We'll call the vet on duty," one officer said. "He's earned it." But just as things began to settle, a sound broke the calm. A metallic click. The officer standing over Caleb stiffened. The man had been playing possum. Somehow, in the scuffle, he'd kept a pocket knife tucked beneath his belt. Now it was in his hand, blade halfway open, and his eyes were locked on Rex. "Knife!" one of the officers yelled, lunging forward. But Caleb moved fast, faster than they expected for someone just beaten and restrained. He twisted onto his side, knife glinting under the harsh beam of the flashlight. His target wasn't the officers, it was Rex. With a grunt of effort and a burst of rage, Caleb drove his arm forward, blade aiming low. Eleanor screamed, trying to reach her dog, but her body wouldn't respond. Rex reacted first. He shifted his weight, snarling as he rose. The movement made his bad leg buckle, but he didn't stop. In one swift surge he lunged, not away, but toward the blade. The knife grazed his side, a red line splitting the grey fur. But Rex's jaws closed around Caleb's forearm again, this time with no intention of release. The force knocked Caleb's head against the floorboards with a crack. The knife dropped instantly. Officers pounced, wrestling him into full restraints, now using cuffs instead of zip ties. "Don't move again," one barked, face flushed with fury. "I swear you won't walk out of here." Caleb didn't respond. He was out cold. Eleanor dragged herself forward, sobbing. "Rex." Rex stood over the attacker's limp body, panting, wobbling. Blood dripped slowly from his side. When he turned to her, his ears dropped slightly, not from fear, but fatigue. He limped over and laid his head gently in her lap. "I'm here," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "I'm right here." The paramedics were already calling in the vet team. One officer removed his jacket and pressed it gently against Rex's wound. Another radioed for backup transport. "He needs a stretcher too," the paramedic said. "Now." One of the younger officers, barely older than a teenager, looked at Rex, then at Eleanor. "I've seen soldiers freeze in situations like that," he said quietly. But he didn't. Eleanor smiled through the tears, her hand never leaving Rex's fur. He was trained by the best. Outside, the lights kept flashing, but inside that little room, silence had returned. Not the silence of fear, but of survival. And in that stillness, something shifted. Eleanor wasn't just the victim anymore. She was the witness to a promise kept. The emergency vet arrived 20 minutes later, sirens off, but urgency in every movement. They wheeled in a portable stretcher, speaking in soft tones, almost reverent, as if they knew this wasn't just a dog. Rex didn't resist. He allowed them to lift him, though his breathing was shallow, his gaze unfocused. Eleanor followed close behind, limping slightly, wrapped in a blanket the paramedics had given her. They placed Rex on the back of a mobile care unit, and for a brief second he whimpered, soft, pained. Eleanor reached out, holding his paw. "You're not leaving me," she said firmly. "You hear me, soldier? You don't get to check out early." One of the techs smiled gently. "He's stable. We're going to treat the wound and get fluids in him. He's a fighter." Eleanor just nodded, watching as the doors closed. Inside the house, Caleb was being hauled out in cuffs, bloodied, broken, silent. He didn't look at Eleanor as they passed, but she looked at him. She wasn't trembling anymore. "You picked the wrong house," she whispered. Neighbors gathered as police began taking statements. Some recognized Eleanor from the school, others only knew her as the woman with the old shepherd in the yard. None had ever imagined this. Later that morning, just before dawn, Eleanor sat on a bench outside the emergency vet's office, waiting. The night air had cooled. Birds were starting to stir. She held Michael's badge in her lap. The door opened. "He made it through," said the vet, smiling. "Stitches, fluids, rest. He's a little anemic and arthritic, but he's got heart. More than most I've seen." Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the weight lift. They brought Rex out gently, wrapped in soft blankets, a cone around his neck, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. The tail didn't wag, but the intent was there. She bent down, wincing, until their faces were close. Her voice cracked. You saved me. Again. He rested his head against her shoulder. A week later, back home, the bedroom still bore scars, dented walls, stained floorboards, a shattered frame that Eleanor refused to throw away. She had it repaired, not to forget, but to remember what had been broken and survive. Rex now slept beside her bed again, not tied, not muzzled, not forgotten, and every morning she brewed 2 cups of tea, one for Michael, one for her. And in the quiet, as the sun pushed through the curtains, a familiar shape would rise slowly from the floor, stretch stiff legs, and settle at her feet, silent, watchful, ready, because some protectors don't retire. They just wait for the moment they're needed most. Weeks passed. The story spread through town and eventually beyond it. Elderly woman saved by retired police dog. Headlines ran, photos circulated, and strangers began sending letters. Some sent biscuits for Rex. Others shared stories of dogs who'd once protected them too. But Eleanor didn't need the noise. What mattered was quieter. She no longer locked the gate with trembling hands. She no longer jumped at the sound of wind against the shutters. Fear still visited her sometimes, in dreams or echoes. But it didn't stay, because she knew what Rex had reminded her that night. She was not alone. The badge now sat on the mantel beside a new photo. Rex resting at her feet, eyes half closed, ears perked. The frame was simple, but the moment it held was sacred. He hadn't just stopped a man. He'd kept a promise Michael made long ago, that Eleanor would always be protected, always loved, always safe, even when he was gone. Even if the one guarding her did it on 4 legs, with greying fur and silent strength. Some said Rex was just doing what he was trained to do. That instinct and muscle memory had kicked in. But Eleanor knew better. Because when she whispered, "I don't feel safe anymore," he answered in the only way he knew how, by standing between her and the darkness, again and again and again. Maybe you know someone who's been through something like this. Or maybe this story stirred something inside you, a memory, a moment, a face you haven't thought of in years. If this touched your heart in any way, take a second to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that loyalty still walks this earth, sometimes on 4 quiet paws. And tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far Rex's story can travel, because stories like his don't just stay in one town. They live in every home, in every heart that's ever known the weight of fear, and the warmth of something standing between you and the dark without asking for anything in return. Thank you for watching. Until next time.